collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we'll hear about the Transgender Day of Visibility and events to mark it.
People tend to confuse sexual orientation with gender identity. The two are not the same thing. So when we're talking about transgender people specifically, we're talking about people just in terms of their identity and not in terms of their sexual preference.
And new regulations governing the guaranteed minimum income. We'll talk to someone at the Labour Department about the possibility of some beneficiaries losing their benefits altogether if they don't take training that's being offered.
To get them out of their homes and into a proper structure, proper workplace. Not because they are going to work a certain job and it's not a job, it's training, first of all, in very basic skills that will make them more employable, such as getting out of bed in the morning.
March the 31st every year is set aside as International Transgender Day of Visibility, or TDOV. The idea is to celebrate transgender people and raise awareness about trans rights. Joining me this week are Alda Vidian of Accept's Trans Action Group and Tara Papadopoulou, who is president of the LGBT Club at the European University in Nicosia. Al, let's start with you. People get very confused about who we're referring to when we talk about either LGBT or LGBTI or LGBTIQ or trans in general. So can you clarify?
Yes, certainly. People are indeed struggling to find who each letter represents. So very briefly, LGB, as one might imagine, is lesbian, gay and bisexual. And the T refers to transgender, the I to intersex, the Q to questioning or queer. And trans in itself, or transgender, is about people, or covers people who don't identify with the gender that's marked for them on their birth certificate. They don't feel that it represents them. Some may feel that they belong to the more traditionally female or male identities as it's shaped and seen in society. Some don't identify with either, and it comes under the general umbrella of trans or transgender.
And when we talk about trans rights, what are we talking about there? Because this is very much a legal issue, as I understand it. In some countries, you can change sex and be recognised legally as the new sex that you chose. But in other countries you can't. You will always be whatever's on your birth certificate.
That's very true. Basically you said it. Trans rights in this sense essentially concerns about recognition under the law. And at least in Europe, there has been over the last, say, 5-6 years, a real surge both in trans visibility and also in terms of the momentum towards securing legal gender recognition in more and more states. Having said that, it's only 4 states, which I believe are Denmark, Ireland, Malta and Norway, who actually allow trans people a swift, accessible and non-medically pathologized route to changing over their documents. In all the other states that offer some kind of process, and not all states do in Europe, there are very arduous criteria to fulfill, which include sterilization, being vetted by the medical establishments as having some kind of gender dysphoria or pathology at times, and sometimes it requires people to get divorced. So and of course it requires a lot of access to services that may not be available in the state itself. So it's very difficult and an evolving issue.
Let's come to you, Tara. You're the president of the LGBTI group at the European University, and you've organised something to mark this day this year. So tell us about the film you're going to be showing and a little bit about the club, who are members and what are you hoping to achieve?
It's actually now a very small club. We need much more people to come join us for that to be something that contributes to the problems that the LGBT society faces. So right now we are actually doing our second meeting ever, and this is going to be another movie night. So Al informed me about the Transgender Day of Visibility, and we thought that Boys Don't Cry is going to be a good movie to see on the day. It's based on a true story of American transgender man who is discovered because, of course, at the time the movie is placed, he couldn't go with the...
he couldn't go through fully with medical transition.
Indeed. So he's discovered to have the female parts, and I think you have to come to see the movie to see what happens after that. Yeah, I think people are gonna love it, even if they are trans or if they are not. It's a struggle of just a man, and just because of that.
It is a mainstream movie, actually, isn't it?
It is, actually. In fact, this is the movie that made Hilary Swank famous, because she won her first, one of two, I think, Oscars for Best Actress for her portrayal of Brandon Teena, who is the trans man who's the central character in the film. It was it made a huge splash both for her and, of course, as a an indicator that there are trans people out there, cinematically speaking.
Well, we'll come in a minute to where people can see it and when, but tell us a little bit about the club itself. You said it's small at the European University.
Yeah, it's actually too small.
How do you attract members? Because it's not surely only for LGBTI people, is it?
No, it's not. It's for all people who support equality between the two communities. I mean, the only requirement is don't cause trouble, don't be against us. You cannot join the club if you just want to come in and say, I think what you're doing is wrong. No. The club is very small, and I have difficulty reaching students. Students are not going to see the posters that we put on, and they are not informed about all the clubs, or our club as well. So for now, it's just I'm going to my friends in psychology, in the English literature club. I also have some friends, and I'm like, please come. So we're trying to do that.
But is this because a lot of the students simply don't connect mentally with an LGBTI club? And if not, why not?
I'm going to say no. I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is because they don't know there is an LGBT club. There is no promotion for the clubs. It's only the big ones like the athletics or the music that they have the big budgets, so they get the more students. So most people don't know that the LGBT club exists, and I think we are going to have to do something. We're going to organize something in our university to spread the word about who we are, and that you can subscribe to our Facebook page in UC LGBT Club. Even if you are a UC student or not, we would welcome you, and you can be part of the family.
Okay, come back to you, Al, and the work of Accept. We talked briefly at the beginning about the legal issues.
Yes.
Now, here in Cyprus, attitudes have changed since the marches started.
Yes.
I mean, I can remember the first one was just like wow, how many people came out to support. And it does seem, although the numbers may have fallen slightly, that there is still a great deal of support for people to treat everybody equally.
There is, and I think it's in that respect, there's a lot of quiet optimism, if you wish, in the LGBTI community here in Cyprus, that over time more and more people will be free, either to be very openly an LGBTI ally or an out and open and proud LGBTI member of the community. Having said that, when it comes to this sort of hurdle of gender identity, I think there's a lot of work yet to be done. People tend to confuse sexual orientation with gender identity. The two are not the same thing. So when we're talking about transgender people specifically, we're talking about people just in terms of their identity and not in terms of their sexual preference. So basically, if somebody ends up with an F for female on their birth certificate, in a trans person's case, they will not grow up to identify as female, at least not in the sense that society sees traditionally a woman or female people to be. And they may or may not choose thereafter to undergo what we call medical transition, to change their bodies. But for sure, they will not be comfortable being seen as what that F represents on the birth certificate. And the biggest push in Cyprus at the moment, the work being done by Accept and Accept's Transaction Group, is to secure finally a clear, transparent and easily accessible gender recognition law, so people can change their documents and have a life which doesn't require them to shed their privacy in a very intrusive way every time they go to the bank or every time they want to show their passport to travel to a different country, or even simply just use the public, loo, the toilet.
Well, I was going to come to that because there was a huge story, wasn't there, in the States? Oh, gosh.
And it's still
going
reverberating.
on, and it depends which state you're in as to which toilet you can use. I mean, this is extraordinary that in this day and age we have these sort of issues.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it's not yet got to that point in Cyprus, and hopefully by the time this subject comes up, we'll have done a lot of the groundwork, so there won't be this furore that we saw in the States. But essentially, transgender people want exactly the same as anybody else. They want to get on with their lives without a fuss, without, causing undue imposition on anybody else, and having access to a toilet is simply the same desire to have access to a safe space, just like anybody else would. And it is the most...
How do you solve the toilet problem? I mean, why is it a problem? Why don't we just have mixed loos, but all with doors?
Right, yes. Yeah. I think that's certainly a very logical and simple way of addressing it. I think it's also dismantling some of the infrastructure that's been considered normal, where, we segregate the genders and we position one sex, in this case, as weaker than the other, and we have this ongoing narrative of women are always vulnerable, which of course they can be, but in this sense, transgender people are also women and men, and quite frankly, they are at the forefront of enduring and experiencing vulnerability and being exposed, sometimes not just to verbal harassment, but to violence, as we know just looking at the number of deaths already this year. I don't know how many trans women have been brutally murdered. So, yes, going back to the toilet issue, I think we need to make it first a non-issue by not necessarily having such gendered segregation. I think neutral toilets would be of benefit to everybody.
And is this particularly the case in southern Europe, where we're still, to a large degree, enthralled, first of all, to the church, which is very good at segregating people, not just the Orthodox Church, and a lot of religions do it. And it wasn't so very long ago that girls were always chaperoned and so on. We are moving away from that, but is our historical, societal culture holding us back?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have a problem with church in particular, because they advocate modesty and this and that, and what you realize is they are just building up these stereotypes of the weaker woman, and then on the other hand, the predatorial man, like as if every man who's gonna go into the bathroom is gonna pick and see what the women are being like. I mean, I think it's kind of ridiculous. I don't know about the mutual bathrooms. Maybe we should just issue a law right now just to let the transgender people go to the bathrooms that they want to use. I mean, if you look like a man, you're a trans man, and you look like a man, if you go to the women's bathroom, you're going to have as much trouble as an actual man. Yeah. I mean, it's just logical. And then we can move to mutual bathrooms, because the church is going to have a problem with putting men and women together, but maybe they're going to be more lenient towards the choice of just let these people go as they feel.
Let's finish up with Boys Don't Cry. You're screening it on the day itself, Friday, March the 31st. Where and when and how can people find out more?
We are going to make an event on Facebook. It's March 31st, Friday at 6 o'clock on the evening. It's going to be at the EUC University building in room 103. And it's on the first floor. You just go through the numbers and you're going to find 100.
Well, you'll have signs up, I'm sure. So
Of
that's
course.
6 p.m. on March the 31st. The event is free, the public very welcome, and there will be a question and answer session afterwards. So you can join them on Transgender Day of Visibility, March the 31st.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Starting next week, there'll be new rules about the Guaranteed Minimum Income, or GMI as it's known. And those who are offered a 6-month job and turn it down stand to lose their benefits. To explain how the system's going to work, we're joined from the Ministry of Labour by Fanos Gouroufexis. Fanos, first of all, what's the idea behind this? I mean, I know you want to get unemployed people into the workplace, but if it's for 6 months, they'll be back on GMI again afterwards, won't they?
Actually, let's start from the beginning, because it's not actually new rules in the sense that these rules have been part of the legislation since it was first enacted in 2014. And it's gradually being implemented, this legislation, which is a very complex, very big, it's a reform, total reform of the benefit system, of the welfare system. So now 6 months now, already the ministry is into the third phase of this reform, which has to do with engaging the able to work individuals that are receiving state aid to the workplace or in other structures. We think that it is a healthy thing to participate in society, especially in the workplace, for those people that are able to work, because not every beneficiary of the GMI is able to work. Actually, the majority is not able to work.
But this covers some 2,000 individuals, I think it
This
said.
new scheme that has been rolled out this last Friday actually concerns 2,000 individuals which will receive not a job placement but training. It's about training to improve their employability.
So what sort of jobs will they be doing? Because this is only in the government sector, in government offices or semi-government organisations. Why don't you roll this out in the private sector as well?
I will explain. It's not just one scheme that has been rolled out. This is actually the sixth in succession scheme, and its purpose is to cover also this side of training which will be provided. So these people will not be working per se. They will be receiving training in the broader state sector or in the municipalities or in NGOs.
How are you going to match up the individuals to jobs where they will actually learn something? Because if it's like internships, very often, actually, they don't learn a great deal in 6 months. So how are you going to make sure that at the end of the 6 months they have benefited somehow and are more employable?
We have 5 other schemes, and it's worth mentioning them because they are important in answering your question. We have 5 other schemes. All 5 of them have been recently rolled out, and they target different aspects, different areas. For example, we have a specific scheme that subsidizes employers of the private sector with the first 3 months full 100% subsidization by the state for them to train the individual, and then another 12 months of 60% subsidization of the employee cost so that they can employ him for a long-term duration. We have several other schemes that are specific in providing training in specific areas. For example, we have one that trains quite a large number of individuals for the new tourist season so that they can work in specific jobs in hotels or restaurants or bars, or where we know from our data as a ministry that there is a demand for labor because the tourist sector is blooming, there's growth there. Also the same thing we are doing for the retail sector, where again we have growth. We are training these people to work in retail shops. We have also another scheme that we are training a smaller number, but this is important because we are training them to provide care and assistance services, which the services are being subsidized also by the state, by the ministry, for people with disabilities or old age. And we have another scheme rolled out that we are subsidizing private job finding agencies, registered agencies. We are subsidizing them to find permanent jobs for these people.
But surely the unemployment department's doing that.
Of course, but this way we are welcoming every type of collaboration that we can, because we do recognize that if we work with the private sector together, we can achieve more than only with the efforts of the private sector. So this scheme completes this effort because we collaborate with them.
You've had some of these schemes running already, you said, for a while.
For a couple of months. Now they are being rolled out because we started rolling out these schemes last December, one by one, with the final of them being the scheme that was rolled out this Friday, which comes and completes these previous schemes in the sense that for people that are in the GMI, and they have, as they always had by the legislation, the obligation to seek work or to take up work if they can take up work. Now, for these people that couldn't or wouldn't participate in any of those previous 5 schemes that are still active, then here comes, this is why...
This is the stick, not the carrot.
It's not actually a stick, it's for...
Well, if they turn it down, they're going to lose their benefits.
For sure. Unless they have a valid reason for turning down this training, because for the way the ministry's services look at this thing is that it's an important step for people that have been in the margin of these efforts for many years, not because of the GMI. The GMI is very recent, it's 2 years, but the public assistance.
You're talking about the long-term unemployed.
Long-term beneficiaries of benefits like the public assistance that has been around for more than 15-20 years, and people have been in the margin for a long time. It is very important as a first step, and this is actual studies that support these things, to get them out of their homes and into a proper structure, proper workplace. Not because they are going to work a certain job, and it's not a job, it's a training, first of all, in very basic skills that will make them more employable, such as getting out of bed in the morning, such as having a structured way to communicate with other people, being part of a structure. These are very basic skills that some of these people are not qualified with because of the many years that they have been outside of these structures. Okay,
so if one of these people takes up a job, I don't know, here at the Labour Ministry, what sort of work will they be doing?
They will be receiving training in areas such as, first of all, let's take even this from the beginning. It's a different kind of structure that is intended for people that have degrees or postgraduate degrees, for people that have finished high school but do not have a university degree or diploma, and another different one for people that have not even finished school. So, first of all, it depends on their individual qualifications. Which is where I said
about how you decide where to place them doing what, because
yes,
that's terribly important. If you take somebody and place them, you say it's training, but suppose you go to Marula down the corridor and you say, for the next 6 months, Marula, you're in charge of this young man and you're going to teach him whatever you're going to teach him. He may just sit there and think, what is all this about? It might even have a counterproductive thing is what I'm trying to say, because if he's not interested in what he's doing because he wasn't matched up properly, it could make things worse, couldn't it?
No,
I mean, the way it's carried out is of vital importance.
Yes, it is important, but let's not forget that this program is not being rolled out on its own, on a self-pilot kind of way. It's being rolled out by the Human Resources Development Authority, which has a very, very detailed plan, which has been approved, of course, by the minister. How they are going to evaluate on a weekly or bi-weekly basis what is being gained by each individual or each group in the environment he has been placed. But the most important, and I must insist on this because it's based on our scientific evaluation as a ministry, is getting these people to merge into a structure which now is not a part of their lives. And for the people that have been many years in this situation, it is very difficult, just like that, one day to tell them, now go to this employer, and for the employer to accept them. It takes some preliminary work, and this is part of it. This is part of the preliminary work that we aim to lead these people into liking first a set structure and adjusting to it, and eventually seeking it out for the benefits it offers, both in increased income when they finally get a job, as well as increased health in all aspects.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up, please, by explaining to me how you are going to quantify at the end of the 6 months or a year or whatever, and look back and say, this is working. What methodology have you got in place to find out whether it's doing what you hope it's going to do?
First of all, to answer this, we have to say that with this reform that we have been implementing, one major step we have already taken is that we have the registry of benefits and beneficiaries. This is a big deal. It's not just an Excel sheet with the beneficiaries. We have a complete registry with every beneficiary that receives state aid, especially GMI recipients, with all of their data, especially pertaining to their skills and employability. So this kind of training goes in there, and it helps the services of the ministry to focus their efforts in suggesting or suggesting jobs to these individuals that they have the skills to perform. So,
yes,
for
but
example,
at the end of the training, you're going to need to go through your spreadsheet and see whether or not, or how many, have actually gone off the spreadsheet because they
Yes.
have found work. And you
Yeah.
have to be able to measure that.
the ministry does that for every one of its programs. For example, we know with the data and measurements and yearly evaluations that, for example, the program that the ministry had about the placement for 6 months of university graduates in businesses for gaining this kind of experience has led to 52% of these people being employed by the same organizations that had them as trainees. We measure that throughout every one of the ministry's schemes, including this one.
So it looks like some 2,000 of long-term unemployed people are going to be offered, well, not jobs, but training in the government sector. And we've been talking about it to Fanos Gourofexis from the Ministry of Labour. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.